Hello. Well, good evening for me and good morning for you, all the way in Sydney, Australia. Today I have the honor of speaking with Anuraj Gambhir, and he is going to introduce himself in a few seconds. But I would like to say that throughout the last 20 odd years, I've been delving into holistic thinking and also exponential thinking, but I had never found anyone like you, Anuraj, who actually combines both exponential and holistic thinking. Uh, Good morning again, and could you please tell us a little bit about yourself so that our audience knows you better?
Hello, good evening, Alvaro, and good morning from Sydney. Yes, it's a real pleasure to speak here with you, and to give a brief introduction. Basically, my background is in telecommunications in mobile technology, but prior to that, I actually grew up in India, and my upbringing actually, just to start a little bit from the early days, was my parents. Actually, my mom is very spiritual, and my dad has been a technology person. So I suppose I've imbibed aspects of both my parents, and that's why a lot of the work I've been doing actually and been moving forward is where technology meets spirituality. So in terms of my background, I started in the mobile carrier sort of operator space, setting up and designing the mobile network operator, carriers across the world in North America, in Europe, in Switzerland, with Orange in Australia. And then I worked with the mobile manufacturer community with the devices, mobile phones and wearable technologies. And then for the last 10, 12 years, I've been really on my own consulting, speaking and teaching and mentoring a lot of startups across the world in hardware, in IoT, in smart cities and smart life in general. So I've really been focusing a lot on health and wellness, on future of education and learning, looking at transportation, and that holistic sort of approach to life in general.
That's very interesting, and I guess I have no doubt about why we are having this conversation today. It was started the day we went out surfing here in the Costa Rican Northern Pacific back in February before the pandemic, and you brought up the topic of the nexus between technology and spirituality, and I grew very curious about it. And then, later the pandemic hit, and a couple of weeks after that, you published an article about an idea of yours to create a white mirror kind of vision, contrasted to the Black Mirror idea of the Netflix series. But I would say the essence of your proposal is to intentionally provoke a transformation of perception, one that would allow us to enter into a course of regeneration of ecosystems, rejuvenation of thought. Um, I would even call it a renaissance of sorts. Uh, 500 years ago, the communities that started leading this process of renaissance were the ones that were able to shift from the beliefs they had back then into a different kind of thinking methodology, which was based in science, expressed in art in many forms, and that allowed us to engage in some sort of different degrees of freedom that led to innovation, and innovation brought with it technological progress, and this transformed us into the civilization we are today. But perhaps we are at the crux of another change. And what could you tell us about this moment we're in right now?
Sure. So I think it's a very interesting and redefining time in history, obviously, as we go through quite a transformation and a wake-up call for the planet. And I think we've already been seeing so many signs of the planet, our Earth, saying that we really need to wake up because of climate change and issues with the environment. But now with the pandemic, and I think which has really brought about a reset and almost like a rejuvenation of thinking, where I think we need to wake up to that whole new world of reality and saying we'd become too material. We'd become, moving to a world which was just becoming, full of, you could say, selfish behavior or egoism and so forth, and negativity, and unfortunately dystopia. And those are some of the things which have been depicted in this very powerful Netflix series called Black Mirror, where technology is being sort of used in that way. But I wanted to flip the model and say, why don't we create a world which is a lot more positive, where optimism can realm and really, bring about a transformation in our thinking. Because at the end of the day, I think it's abundance, it's over scarcity, and so many other facets that will really bring about that new world order that we can think and really bring that equality in life. And I think we're seeing all that happen right now in so many levels of the equality wars and of these different facets that humanity is going through. So the white mirror concept is really nothing of a breakthrough, I would say, but it's really a amalgamation of so many different thinking, from optimism, positive psychology, what we preach at Singularity University in terms of exponential mindset and thinking, and using exponential technologies like AI, synthetic biology, IoT, augmented virtual reality, and so forth, to come together and really be used in a much more positive manner. And I think with AI specifically, we've really seen a manifestation of AI through robotics, for example, and we've seen great Hollywood blockbusters like Terminators and so forth. But I think that's where Black Mirror has been sort of projected towards a Terminator plus plus scenario, which is extremely powerful, but unfortunately leaves the common man thinking of a very dystopian future and being left in a lot of fear in that matter. So I wanted to really bring about that flip and say we can really all thrive in a whole new world, which is going to be so much more harmonious for our living.
Right, and one of the you make a list of suggestions of shifts that we can implement in this transformation, and I would actually take the liberty to connect the dots between that idea of the white mirror that you presented with another idea that you shared on a book called The Serendipity Mindset, and I have to thank you for it because I'm in the middle of reading it, and I find it very interesting how you can intentionally connect the dots that are not necessarily visible for everyone, but that they might be significant to you. And perhaps this conversation is a result of that. But also you go beyond, and you don't talk about a mindset, but about a heartset. Perhaps what we need is to reset our hearts, our emotions, our spirituality in a particular way that leads us in a different direction. I've tried to define spirituality in non-religious terms, and in fact, if you look into Harari is going to give you his very skeptical opinion about spirituality. But to my young daughters, I tell them that spirituality is the configuration of our ability and intention to construct and develop our willful power to do things. So you can have a dream, awake or asleep, or you can have a thought, or you can have an interest or a passion. But in order to transform that into something concrete, or maybe not even concrete, but something of value, then whatever spirituality you've engaged in is going to help you through that process, which is day by day, as every single startup has to go through, step by step. There is no leapfrogging when you're starting something of value. So how do you understand this idea of a heart set vis-a-vis mindset?
Sure. So in my career, actually, of being chief innovation officer or managing innovation for many large corporates for over 15 years, actually, I think I really learned about the discipline of innovation, building frameworks, building the mindset of innovation from a culture perspective, and really looking at, but what was really missing, what I found is it's the deeper connect with the people, with humanity. And that's where it sort of evoked me in that sense to look at how do we connect at a very deep empathetic level where we can impact neuroplasticity, where we can really connect heart to heart really with someone, and then come up with, 1 plus 1 is more than 11. So it's working in a collaborative manner. So one of the terms I coined called collaboration, which is open collaborative innovation, is really talking about that. And that's where the term sort of heartset came about, saying that once we connect heart to heart, and once we can really get to a point where we're thinking along the same level, physically, mentally, and spiritually, then we are really connecting at a much deeper, harmonious stage. So in fact, it's one of the aspects of a book that I'd been envisioning to write, The Philosophy of Innovation from Mindset to Heartset. So I've written a few chapters of it, but it's still in the making, and I've got some other projects which have come up in the meantime. But I think the aspect of serendipity and really building that aspect of it being almost a muscle or something which will really help you throughout your life. Because when you go out there, and I think you certainly must have seen the law of attraction, the movie called The Secret, which depicts about the law of attraction and so forth. And I think everything comes together around you when you start thinking the right way, when you start taking the right actions. So I think it's all of that, sort of the universe conspires to make everything happen for you. So I think that's why it's all about dreaming the right dreams, as I call it. In fact, I've also held the title of chief dreamer with a few companies earlier in my vast career. So it's been really fun talking and thinking stage left, where you really can build an innovation understanding much beyond the evolutionary or incremental aspects of innovation to thinking a lot more disruptive or radical. And I think my introduction and work with Singularity U has been really a great wake up that I've had over the last decade, working very closely on so many facets and like-minded people. And actually this year started with an amazing serendipity trip, which was going to the World Economic Forum, going to Singularity U headquarters, and prior to that CES, where again I had some amazing moments of moments with even the Steve Wozniak, for example, meeting him again after a long time, the co-founder of Apple, was at CES in Vegas. And then, of course, in February, coming to the Singularity U Costa Rica summit, which was quite amazing again. And I think the wake up for me was really when we went to the Blue Zone, and especially spending time with you up in the surf in the Nicoya Peninsula area, which was really awakening, I would say. And I think it's bringing nature together, bringing those aspects of a holistic life that is, I think, a lot more important now for us to come about.
Right. And going back to your positivity, which is actually contagious, I would say, you suggest a list that can be enlarged. And I think all of us should add to the list of shifting from scarcity to abundance, from hoarding to sharing, from darkness to light, from hatred to love, from fear to courage, from isolated to connected, from observer to participant, from individual to collective, from siloed to holistic, from finite to eternal. And I think all these shifts are a shift in mindset and a shift in heartset. But what would you say is the critical factor of effective transformation of our belief system, thought process, the way we engage with others and with nature? What do you think is missing? How can we contribute to that shift?
I think it's about opening our hearts, really. And when you embrace the beautiful environment you've got, the people that are around you, you really want to open and shift your consciousness to embrace that positivity, that impact. And as it's called in the brain, the reticular activation system is what will drive you and then make you, again, that law of attraction sort of element comes in. But I think it's as you go into nature, you become a lot more harmonious from that physical surrounding. As you surround yourself with great people, and different sort of thinking aspects of there, you really get a wider perspective of life. And I think it's all of those come together. And I think I sort of draw an analogy to innovation teams in corporates, because what I found in some of the teams that I managed, or even where we sort of co-created, when we had a very diverse team from transdisciplinary sort of perspective. So I'm talking about cross industry and multiple disciplines. So people from different backgrounds, different walks of life, and altogether different experiences were coming together to come up with taking some of these great ideas, nurturing them, and bringing them to fruition into a real world. We could really see people from, like, what I had in the team was psychologists, sociologists, ethnographers, uh, industrial designers, technologists, of course, and hardware designers and software people and so forth. But all of those different diverse lawyers, accountants, even them coming together to bring in new perspectives. And then we sort of built up new radical innovation propositions. We would really come up with something a lot more, disruptive for the market and thinking stage left. And I think that's what we've seen with some of the bigger propositions in the gig economies out there and with the Airbnbs and all that. It's when you really thought stage left and came up with those breakthrough ideas and thinking out of the box very much, I think. And I think you've got to define which box you think out of. And that's why I often say that innovation precedes strategy, because a lot of times companies, they build a strategy and then they limit themselves to that sort of approach or that box. Whereas if you sort of got to break that box open, I feel more often than required, and have that really visionary thinking to be able to look for the right foresight. And that's where serendipity. And I think if you open your hearts again, coming back to that point, you will attract some amazing things in life. And I've really seen that throughout my career.
Interesting. I also like the fact that on your website you have a philosophy tab where you've actually created terms like collaboration that you were mentioning right now, that I would, in my own words, I think what it means is collaborative innovation. And the truth is that innovation is collaborative. So you are hitting the nail on the head when you're saying this is the right way to approach it. And then you have two other terms. One is Simplexity, which I like very much. I think it relates to Steve Jobs' mindset, and even further back to the Renaissance, to Leonardo da Vinci and others. And then you speak about Experiating. How do these three concepts conform a framework of thought and action that we can adopt right now?
Sure. So actually, it goes a little bit historically. I came up with Simplexity term almost like 2.5 decades ago, just at the beginning of my career. And then I came up with collaboration and then Experiation. And now I've actually got a fourth term also coming up, which I'll tell you in a minute. But Simplexity really came about when I worked in the mobile phone industry. So, we really found that when we were designing mobile phones, we were making them so complex. We were adding so much functionality, so much of technology is embedded in there. But for the end user, it was kind of the 80-20 rule we talk about. 80% of the people use less than 20% of the features. And how do you really present something so simply? So it was all about the UI, the presentation. So you hide the technology in the back end and you're enabling the benefits and the core proposition, which is very simply and very intuitively presented on the front end. So that was Simplexity, complex made simple, pretty much in simple terms. And then the sort of collaboration was very much in my innovation career, really looking at the more you share, you get so many more times back, multiple times, exponential times back. And that's what I found. A lot of people were hoarding a lot of ideas. In fact, I myself used to, at one stage, obviously hoard ideas because people would say, oh no, that's patentable, or that's, but an idea itself at a very early stage is very raw. I think it takes a lot of energy and courage to take it to the next level. And that's what I think, it depends on what stage you're talking about. But I think when you it was that idea about technology and spirituality when I talked about, aspects of that, which I initially kept a lot to myself. But then this moment I started sharing, I got so many more aspects of it coming out to me. So looking at beyond the 5 senses and how we can use technology and looking at biofeedback. And then I started, the whole world opened up in front of me the moment I started looking at it, and people gave me new touch points and so forth. The third term was in the last, say, about 7 years ago now, 6-7 years ago, which has been Experiation. And that's really about experimentation. It's very much about from the old school storytelling to immersive story showing. And I think it talks a lot, refer to more like augmented and virtual reality and technology in that form, where we really can put ourselves into a lot more, uh, empathetic perspective of what we are really trying to envisage in that story. And when you can be in your shoes. So one of the startups I was mentoring was called Stand in My Shoes. And that was actually a movie. It was a crowd-fueled movie that we were making on the global empathy deficit. And we were actually having Obama in there. We were going to be featuring His Holiness Dalai Lama. Unfortunately, the movie didn't happen because the funds weren't raised to that level, but it did transform into a VR sort of a project. And I think it's actually, I've expanded a lot of that into a white mirror concept, which actually we're working on. In fact, today I've got a detailed call of a narrative that we're working on for white mirror in virtual reality, and using also the Tesla suit, which is a full body haptic suit and so forth, and looking at some great ideas there. So yeah, I think it's these sort of terms, they coexist, and they sort of, I've kept them open. I haven't really trademarked any of them, very frankly. And the new term that I've sort of more working as I'm talking about the connection with the heart is still in the making. And I've given a tentative sort of a name called coheartability. So it is about cohesion. It's about heart and humanity. It's about coherence and cohesion. It's about adaptability. And I think what we're really noticing now in today's time, of course, is how rapidly can we adapt to these times? How relevant are we? And I think with the COVID and the pandemic situation that we are facing, we really need to be able to adapt so quickly to find what's meaningful for us for humanity, for us individually, for us in a community, and being able to help each other. And I think we've really seen everybody come together in such an amazing manner. The whole world has come together to help each other and collaborate at unprecedented levels that we've never seen before. So I'd say a lot of positive things are coming about, in spite of, one can talk about the Black Mirror things where people are hoarding toilet paper and all kinds of things which have been happening also around the world. But it's kind of a refresh startup, a restart, I would say, that's happening to the world, a new world order, which it's up to us now how we want to make it. Do we want to create the right white mirror thinking out there and proliferate really that positivity and bring a world which is thriving with a lot more equality for us? Or do we want to create that world which is where people and the corporates of the old type are just looking after profits? Whereas I think if we can imagine on the other side as we come out, if every company could become a B Corp as it comes out on the other end, and we start thinking of the planet, people, and purpose before profit, that should be at the heart of every organization coming out of the other end.
Nice, very nice. I think we are right now living at the convergence of multiple crises. We have, well, obviously a sanitary crisis. We have an economic crisis that seems to be constant lately. We have a leadership crisis globally and maybe even domestically in some countries. We have a climate crisis, clearly. We have a biodiversity crisis, and I even think we have an energy crisis. So these six are converging. And the last semester, we saw the pandemic make them all more visible, even though it hasn't helped us prioritize them, right? I mean, 8 months ago, your country was going through the worst bushfires in history, by probably an order of magnitude worse than the worst bushfires that ever existed. So even if we remove the pandemic from this convergence of crises, we see that we were already entering a phase of transition that was partly necessary, partly inevitable, and partly driven by what we would call, I don't know, technology 4.0 or digital transformation or the fourth industrial revolution. It doesn't matter how we call it. We entered an age in which the currency is data. So when we think about everything that is shifting and we analyze the 5 foundational industries of human civilization, which are transportation, energy, food, information, and materials, With the disruptions that we already know that are happening, we can imagine so many sectors being completely disrupted in this decade that it makes us wonder, how can we utilize the energy that the pandemic has brought in order to build back better the world that we are imagining, exactly along the lines of what you were saying. How can we give this guidance? Who should it be? I mean, should it be the two of us? Should this conversation be the beginning of a mindset, or the mindset is already there? Do we need to remove resistance? Do we need to persuade others? Do we need to create a story or a fiction that is strong enough, that is going to persuade a critical mass of humans to actually facilitate the process of moving faster in the direction of where things should be heading to? How do you see this decade playing out? I know it's very difficult to forecast things, but I think you have the sensitivity of where you're coming from, what's your upbringing, and the vision you have to more or less give us an idea of where we should be focusing our attention in.
Sure. No, I think that's some really good points you made there. And of course, it's not going to be easy. I think it's not, it's, as you said, it's kind of a reset 2.0. And we are redefining what, the new world order would look like. And, I think it's definitely every individual needs to take charge for sure. But they have to come together with a harmonious perspective and the view of what that ideal future for us all looks like. And actually, what was interesting for me personally was the wake up that I had at the World Economic Forum, being part of this inaugural event of Wisdom Health, which was 35 conscious leaders coming together and really thinking about how do we look at ancient wisdom, look at disruptive technologies and humane technologies, rather, all coming together to a whole new perspective for creating this new world order. And it was also a wake up for the World Economic Forum, because that's where we had the heads of states and the governments and political sort of leaderships to go beyond the thinking of a material world purely and economic realities, where we need to really start thinking of at a lot more humane level. So I think that sort of wake up has been happening, and you're right for sure. Like the bushfires we've had in Australia, we've had enough nature wake-up calls happening right at our doorstep, and the pandemic sort of accelerated a lot of the thinking for it. So that exponential mindset evolution, as one may call it, has definitely been triggered again to a whole new level. But I think it's every individual, and what we're really seeing in a lot of the protests that we're seeing in America with the BLM movement and so forth, we're really seeing that happen from an individual, community, and then a lot more, across the world, where people are really relating to the issues which are much broader to that, and then bringing it to which I think is a great wake up happening across the board. So what we need to do is harness that and really take those actionable steps so that the governments, and I think what we need is a lot more unified leadership across the world, because now we really realize that the whole world is so much more powerful when it's united. And United Nations, of course, is there. We've seen the World Economic Forum, and I think they're all actually doing some interesting things now, as next year's World Economic Forum, which is going to be a hybrid event. They've realized that they don't need to fly down everybody, and people have to pay tens of thousands of euros for hotel stays. And I think we have to ourselves stay 80 miles away from Davos to find something very low cost, because it was just out of the, it's so extravagant out there. And I think what we're seeing is the travel industry, for example, certainly, and tourism, business travel, I think, has been such an amazing wake-up call that people have realized we don't need to travel. We can do things over Zoom. In fact, what we've been reinventing in Singularity U faculty here in Australia is we've been trying a lot of things in virtual reality. We've been playing with Verbella, with Spatial, with Engage VR. In fact, I've got my Oculus Quest headset right here. And there's some amazing new things we can look at a lot more immersively in terms of how to collaborate, even on a digital platform. But yeah, so I think if we're all coming together to bring about this new wave of thinking, it needs to be provided at a very simple, actionable level, so that even the common man can understand. And I think that's where the emerging markets, because they're the ones who are facing, unfortunately, the pandemic more strongly, and economic survivability and all these issues are very, very, dominant there in countries like India and Brazil and in the BRICS nations and other, emerging markets. So I think we need to really start thinking and be a lot more empathetic to that world, because we may be a little more comfortable in the Western world out here, but we need to really start thinking in the most common man's shoes, and how can we impact their lives and change their mindset so that they can be, a lot more harmonious.
That's great, and it brings me back to a public policy design recommendation that I picked up at the OECD, Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development, that suggests that whenever you're designing any public policy, you should have very clear who is the 50% most vulnerable population of your target of that public policy, whatever it may be, and try to impact that most vulnerable half the most you can. Because if you do that, two things are going to happen. First, you're going to make the let's say the most vulnerable half improve faster, but also you're going to make the other half, the most privileged half, also improve. So this is actually a dynamic of true development that is leading towards what you very well put as harmony, and harmony for all. I know that we're coming close to the end of this conversation. I think we could talk for hours and hours, and every single thing you've said could become a new dialogue in and on itself. But there is a quote from your White Mirror article that I am going to post on the link of this video so that people have access to the whole text. But there's a quote that I would like to read in closing. Humanity needs the right leadership, vision, and action. White Mirror takes us on this magical journey to a utopian future where breakthrough technology and our best ideas at the intersection of science, spirituality, philosophy are deployed to benefit humanity at large, awakening society to take the quantum leap by constructing an exponential mindset of true balance, deep empathy, and total bliss. I think this is fantastic. I wonder if you have anything to add or anything to say before we go.
No, I think you've summed it up well. But I think it's been a great conversation, and I'll be happy to have further conversations on further technologies and things that are also uplifting us. So some of the work that I'm currently involved in, we're actually trying to manifest a White Mirror approach through a pod that we're trying to create, which will really address mental well-being, which is another very big topic that is obviously coming about from the pandemic, and people who are able to, sort of uplift themselves and come up with re-energizing their sort of holistic capability, because that's what we need a lot more right now. Because if it's much more than the pandemic, it's more mental well-being that is going to be impacted for humanity. And we need to really address that. And I've got a lot of different technologies. Maybe very quickly, I could just show you. So I've very recently received the Muse S band, which is a brainwave headset. It actually helps you with, deep relaxation through meditation. And it measures your electroencephalograph, your brainwaves, to be able to give you a biofeedback and actually help you proactively come through a much better mindful state of well-being. And then another one I've got is Heart Math, which is actually brain-heart coherence. And this is one of the companies up in Silicon Valley, which has done some amazing work in measuring your physiological stress through heart rate variability and being able to reduce it through, again, a mindfulness approach and come out. So there's a lot of technology out there which can help us harness and uplift us out there. So it's really a matter of how we can embrace that and take it to a whole new level. And I'd just like to end with saying, Pura Vida.
Pura Vida, thank you very much. That's wonderful. I see you have it written on your, you have a license plate there on top of your door, and that's amazing. Thank you very much for that. Well, I hope we meet again. And until we do, I hope we can have another conversation and follow up on these things, figuring out ways in which we can collaborate, because I think some of your ideas should be out there in the world. And if there is a way in which I can help with that, I'll be very happy to. And I don't think I can hold my daughters much longer in silence before bedtime. So thank you very much, and I hope to talk to you soon.
Certainly. Yeah, thank you very much again.
Pura vida.
Okay, pura vida. Bye-bye.